Hi, I'm Simone Gower, a graduate student getting my master's in book publishing. This is my podcast, Mental Notes, where I have conversations with authors about mental health representation in young adult novels. In this episode, we'll chat with author Natalia Sylvester about her book, Breathe and Count Back from 10. We'll discuss the parallels between mental and physical health, healing from trauma, learning to advocate for oneself and one's body, and the desire for acceptance from family and strangers alike. This episode does touch on consent and sexual abuse. Thank you for listening to Mental Notes. Hello.
Hi, Simone. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm great.
Yeah, well, welcome to Mental Notes. I'm so excited to have you on here, Natalia. It's just, yeah, I've loved your book and I'm
Thank
just so
you.
excited to get to talk to you about it. So,
I really
yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah, I even have my copy right
Oh,
here.
I
So,
love it.
yeah. Well, to get started, do you just kind of want to talk about your inspiration, I guess, for this book for our listeners? So, yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So quickly, just to introduce what Breathe and Count 10 is about. It's about a 17-year-old Peruvian American teen named Veronica. She is disabled. She was born with a condition called hip dysplasia, much like myself. And she lives in a central Florida town where there's a theme park where they have mermaid performers, and it's her dream to become a professional mermaid. So the book takes place during a summer where she finds out that this theme park called Mermaid Cove is holding auditions for a new mermaid, and she wants to try out, but her parents are very strict and they really don't want, like, they wouldn't allow it, and she has to really decide what she will do, like how she's going to handle that. And this is all happening at the same time that she's basically falling in love for the first time. And so a big part of the inspiration was just my own personal experience. Like I mentioned, I too was born in Peru. I came to the US when I was 4. I grew up in and out of surgeries as a child, and I also dreamed about being a mermaid, like a lot of us do, right? Um, but yeah, it was just something that for a long time in my mind, like I knew I always wanted to write about my disability. I just never really knew how to go about it because it was really important to me for the book, for really any story, to not only be solely about one thing, and especially to not make it solely about my character's pain. Because I
Mm.
think, especially when we talk about stories that center marginalized characters, it's very easy to only see them through the lens of um, how we hurt and how we fit outside of this so-called margin. And I really didn't want to kind of reduce her to one thing, but at the same time I didn't want to erase any part of her. Like I think that all our stories should feel very whole, right? And so because my experience growing up with hip dysplasia was not only one thing. There were also so many other things going on in my life at any given time. And so um, I just wanted Vero to be very just as complete and not fragmented solely because of her identity, without erasing any part of her.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really where how the story came to be, where like the mermaids came in. Like the mermaids became the heart of the story. And I very quickly realized like they're also a metaphor for so much of what she's dealing with as someone who maybe does feel fragmented at times. And she's bicultural, she's bilingual, like she kind of exists out of alignment in her own body. She has to come to terms a lot with like how can she accept her body even when others don't. And also, what are the implications of all that from like in terms of her own mental health? And then also the additional layer of it being that her love interest, Alex, um, has depression. And so
Yes.
that's kind of the very long answer to that question.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to say really quickly, I've also always dreamed of being a mermaid. My mermaid name was always Coral. I know, very basic. I had
That's a
like
great one.
a bright coral colored tail. So,
I
yeah.
love it. That's
Yeah.
great.
So I loved that part of the story. It's just fun. And I especially love how you like were able to like incorporate or like, Veronica was able to like incorporate her like culture's like own like story of like this mermaid and was able to kind of like tie that back like with performance and everything too. That was really really beautifully done, and I really
Thank
loved that.
you. Thank you. That means a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, so you kind of mentioned how, with uh, writing marginalized characters, we don't just only want to see stories that, like you said, are about the pain or about, this character overcoming this hard thing. Like we also want, more positive stories too. But again, the reality is not everything in everybody's life is always going to be super
Yeah.
great. And I think that, in the book, you I want to say I think the word you used was glorify, where Vera was kind of talking about how we tend to glorify pain, and almost like try to, paint it as like this like beautiful thing to overcome. But again, the reality is that it's that is like the reality is that it's not always pretty, at the same
Yeah.
time, and being able to just accept things for what they are. Yeah, I just kind of what would you have to say to that?
Yeah, I mean the whole idea of pain was really, really important to me. As I was writing this book, I was also dealing with my own pain into a decision of whether or not I should get a hip replacement, which was like a whole lifelong journey to figure out. And so um there was describe her pain, and which, at the same time was mine. And I realized it was because I hadn't let myself actually sit with it.
Hmm.
That I'd been so invested in like normalizing it, B, just enduring it, um, to the point that like my sense for it, like my threshold for it was just off, right? And maybe like extremely high tolerance for pain, but why should we? Like nobody should have to have it. And so even though like at the time I was thinking of it in a very physical sense, it ended up being really in a bigger sense of how do we tie um, this pain and the reason we endure it, which really comes from this internalized idea that we're a burden if we're expressing it, or if we are somehow not willing to like, not that we're not willing, but if somehow we're struggling to quote unquote overcome it, if we're just honest about it, right? Instead of just sucking it up, which we have like this culture um, that very much wants you to just quietly endure things, right? Um, and so that just became a huge part of the book, and part of her journey of finding her voice and how to stand up for herself and how to advocate for herself, and also um, how to kind of step into her own empowerment, her own sense of actually, I don't deserve to just, constantly have this idea of survival be glorified, right? And why must a scar be like always a battle scar? Why must it always be a wound? Why must everything be a war and why must our bodies even be considered battlefields, right? And I say body, but I also mean the whole body. So I always, I do include mental health in that. So much pride in surviving, or most like nobody actually deserves to have to go through what they go through.
Hmm.
And I think that it's just another way of being more comfortable with like, wow, you're so strong, and yet like, can we maybe more put like as a culture put more effort into making the world a little less hard, so we have less need
Yes,
to survive
yes.
the hardship.
Yeah, yeah, especially with, like you said, being strong or being considered brave. I think in a lot of ways people will kind of tend to just say that so they can move on, right? Like
Mm,
you mentioned, having to sit with this pain. And um, I mean, most people don't like that idea. They don't like thinking, they don't when they themselves are in pain, right? Nobody likes that. But also thinking about other people in pain, I think we kind of like to almost pretend like we don't see it. So it's like saying, "Oh, you're so brave, you're so strong. I've acknowledged that, and now we don't have to talk about it. Now,
yeah,
yeah, now you don't need to actually say, well, I'm still hurting, and whether that's like physically or mentally, we're like, oh, you're brave. Okay, let's move on. Let's change the subject. Yeah, yeah, and I think also with the way that you've like incorporated the physical side of health, like with the mental side of health, like the two are like very connected.
Yeah.
Um, even though, Alex is the one with a diagnosed like mental illness, like
Mhm.
depression, whereas Vero doesn't, but she still, deals with, like struggling with like her mental health in like different ways too, right? You don't necessarily always need a diagnosis for
Yeah.
something, but just having that anxieties and um the feeling of being like a burden and just everything that kind of goes along with that, and a lot of the language that you use kind of when you're talking about um her hip dysplasia and what she's feeling that way could also very much relate to the way that somebody might be thinking about like their own mental struggles too. So I
Yeah.
think that that's a very yeah a very you did a very good job of kind
Oh,
of combining the two and doing that. So
appreciate that because I mean, even as I was writing it, I mean, I was discovering so much about how much they were linked, and how much I actually maybe hadn't even confronted in myself. But the book really, it touches on so much like, trauma from her medical experiences, the trauma of being bullied and ostracized for her physical differences, um, for deeper scars, for the way she walks, and all like the way she internalizes that.
mm,
I feel like that she has to hide or change who she is, and assimilate into like this able-bodied world, which was interesting to me to realize also mirrors the way we assimilate, like as an immigrant, like as into like um into this, into like US culture or really any other culture that somebody might emigrate to. But like what parts of ourselves do we feel we have to let go of or change rather than actually have all the parts of us be fully embraced, right? And accommodated for. So it was just, even though, like you mentioned, Alex is the one with the diagnosis, but uh, I kind of also wanted to touch on how maybe like sometimes we all do carry like these different kinds of struggles without realizing it. And her physical disability, there are days when like to wake up and wonder what your this supposed scale of like 1 to 10 or below it you feel with this activity and like the constant math of it, that's so draining, that's so emotionally. And at the same time, like these two things will they affect one another, and then the next day maybe or in another moment, like our actual mental state also affects the outward circumstances that we're in. So
mhm.
yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so you've already kind of said how, writing this book maybe made you realize um that yeah, maybe like you hadn't like worked through everything, or what was kind of like your thought process like when writing and you were kind of, writing Veronica's character, but also what were you kind of discovering about yourself like throughout the writing process?
Good question. Yeah, like it changed, right, in different journeys of the book, right? Initially, one of the things that was really interesting to discover was that when I first started writing it, like I remember at the time getting a chapter in and I didn't know how to get to the next chapter. And it's because the character of Alex was originally very different. I originally had the first chapter be Vero and Alex sitting by the lake talking, and he notices her scars and kind of really makes her very uncomfortable in how he asks about them. And it just wasn't working. Like I couldn't continue writing the story. And I have a very good friend of mine. She's also a writer. Her name's Natalia Silva, and we always talk about our projects as we're working on them. And at one point, she asked me, like, well, what is a promise you would make to this character? And just right away, I just thought, well, I want to keep her safe. And I realized that the reason I couldn't get to that second chapter was that I had already broken that promise by having it opening literally with like this love interest being someone who's making her so uncomfortable.
Mm,
Um, and someone who is actually not who's actually more of an antagonistic character. And so I changed that. into who we see Alex as now, who's actually like the person that makes her feel safe, and the person who like they relate to each other, and they see and hear each other in different ways. And I think it was a big part of it was that I was realizing like that's the kind of like as a teenager when I was, growing up and, starting to date and everything, like all my fears about being intimate with someone, if I could go back in time, I would like really want to tell that younger version of myself, like, no, you always deserved to feel safe in your body, even as you were exploring it in whatever way that looked like to you as someone who wanted to have full agency of it. Right. And so I was like, well, why shouldn't I write that story? And why shouldn't I write that journey and her meeting that person? And from then it flowed a lot better. And it didn't mean that that I was embracing the hard parts of like those fears,
Mhm.
because that's where we have someone like Jeremy come in. Like I didn't actually want to erase the hard parts, but I wanted to change who gets to be the core of the story and what she's constantly reacting to. So by this like really uncomfortable experience not being like what opens the book, and rather it being something else that had already happened in the past, and it turns out it's a scene in which, she felt like, well, she was actually very violated. And then on top of it, like the the dynamics of her parents coming in, shaming her, and all of these things. But even because they happen off the page, and she only like thinks about them and talks about them later in the book.
Yes.
And so as I was even going through that, I was realizing how much this is really a book about consent. Um, and it's really a book about how do we tell our stories on our own terms when we're ready to tell them? How do we tell them in a way that feels safe, that feels that we're not just offering up these hard parts and these hard experiences to just be consumed as like entertainment rather than something that would maybe help another person feel seen and heard. So that just became really important to me, of making sure I'm not making her feel exposed for the sake of a book. Because I think of her, I think of all my characters as real people, and I think of their humanity and their agency, and like, well, this is your story ultimately, and I'm telling it, but there has to be a trust there. And I think that also comes a lot from like, when I had like I started out in journalism, and so to interview people always felt like this very deeply intrusive. But if I could figure out how to just connect on a very human level and earn someone's trust and be deserving of that trust to tell their story, then I felt like that was a real privilege, right? So it's like, how can I bring that to how I tell Vero's story? And so it was really very much about like, how would she tell this story in a way that in the end makes her feel like she's told her truth and that she's been empowered by the telling of it. And I think that's also where like the definitions at the beginning of each chapter came into play, right? Because it's literally, how do we rewrite our stories?
Mhm.
And how do we take all the language that the world throws at us? And that we internalize often in very ableist ways. Um, and how it's narratives.
Yeah, I also that was I loved everything about this book,
Oh,
if
thank
you
you.
haven't picked up on that yet, but I also really loved how, yeah, each chapter opened with, Vero's own definition of a word, and yeah, just kind of reclaiming like some of those words too. And just, as somebody who, I would consider myself to be pretty able-bodied. I have a lot of minor health issues, a lot of them, but they're all kind of minor. So I'd consider myself an able-bodied person. But in reading like this story, like also, um, you know, made me like more aware of even just the language that I use too, right? Like I think there was one part where, well, now I can't remember which character she was talking to, but can't remember if it was Leslie who said it, but somebody used the word lame,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
And
that was Bunny. That
yep,
was your sister. Yeah.
yep. And okay, it was Danny and saying, oh, that's so lame, or you're so lame, meaning it in a term of, oh, you're doing like the boring thing, like one be more exciting. And the way that it's like, why do we associate, why is that word the same word that we would like use to describe somebody who can't walk very well? Like, why do we correlate the two? And so it was just like very eye-opening, and yeah, just like really powerful to like make me think about like the language like that. And then also just to have Vero herself just like redefining those words and deciding what they're going to mean to her, and what's important for her, and just being able to kind of redefine herself in that way. I thought was really powerful.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, but going back kind of to Alex, and the whole consent and like the trauma and everything, I really appreciated um, your choice to decide to make Alex be somebody that she could be safe with, right? Because, like you said, she deserves that, and like everybody deserves that, right? Everybody deserves to, um, be with people, be around people, especially like in a romantic relationship with somebody that they feel comfortable with and safe with, right? And it's again, it's not one of those things where once you fall in love, like everything is all perfect and everything's super happy, but just realizing like your worth, and being able to be with somebody who also recognizes your worth as a person and makes you feel comfortable enough to be fully yourself, I think is so important and really heartwarming to see in a story like this. Um, but yeah, the trauma that kind of came with Jeremy, I think is also like just as important to talk about, right? It's not a good thing. Um, but I think that you approached it in a really, really good way, the way that you did it. And when when at the time, like when Vera decides to tell Alex like what happened, right? He's not prodding her. He's not, trying to like seek more information. Like she's offering up because she feels safe enough with
Yeah.
him to like divulge like what happened to her. And, Alex's response saying like, I'm so sorry that he violated you in that way, also helped Veronica like realize, obviously she knew what happened like wasn't good to her, but it made her more realize that, oh yeah, that really was not okay. Like that, you know, actually like coming to terms with, while it's not maybe as bad as it could have been, in air quotes, it was still bad. Like it
Yeah.
was still traumatizing, and like her having like trauma from that is very real and very valid.
Yeah, Alex was someone who I I loved writing so much, and I don't get asked about him enough. So I really appreciate you mentioning him because he was so important to the book. And you know, obviously, like this is the Widow story, but someone who, because I was writing about Widow and her visible scars, right? I also was very conscious of, yeah, that some of us have invisible scars, and we never know what a person is going through below this surface and this like facade that we might sometimes have to put out into the world. And so, like, what would it look like for two characters who could see beyond that and really see each other and not expect each other to, like, at all moments be this perfect love interest in order to be worthy of that love? I think sometimes we have this like tendency to just make each other feel like we have to constantly be fixed. Like, like, oh, even sometimes when it's like some like the we hear it often. It's like, oh, somebody can love you, you have to love yourself or whatever, which seems simple enough, but then it doesn't actually take into consideration like how complex the concept of self-love actually is, and how our experiences might have shaped this, like whether we're able to fully love ourselves and fully like love ourselves in the way that we are worthy of and deserve. And it's like if we haven't figured that out yet, does that mean we're not worthy of that love? So I appreciated how their journey is one about like, no, they show up as they are and they can meet each other. And if anything, I just think that like I wanted to have that. I think a lot of times the way we teach fiction, right, is very conflict based, right? Like you don't have a story unless you have conflict, right?
Mhm.
And in the past, I've had even writing instructors say things like, "Okay, you take your character and you make their life like a living hell, like, or you introduce a problem and give them the hardest day ever, right? And that felt really cool to me because I was like, my characters have already gone through really hard days and really hard stuff. Why can't I just listen to everything they've already been through and go from there? Right. And so, um, oh, I forget what my train of thought was with that, but it's kind of like, I just think that like that was kind of how Vero and Alex, that's why they connected so much because they're not like expecting each other to even have to like quote unquote like fix each other through their relationship. They're just accepting of where they are and able to love each other in that way.
Because Alex and Vero have already gone through, like, some of their worst days, like you said. Like, we don't see Alex when he's at his worst. He mentions that things had gotten really bad for him, before he moved. And, Vero's already had, um, she's had a lot of hard days, with her family and with her health and, with Jeremy and all of that. And the way that they're able to connect each other, but they're still also learning kind of how to do that and just like in a normal relationship too. I think it's when Vero comes over, she just found out that she got the part as the mermaid and is super excited. And then Alex is just having one of his, more bad days, one of his not so great days. And, at first Pharaoh's kind of like, okay, like I see that you're upset, but also like I'm this great thing happened to me. Like, why aren't you happy right now? But then she kind of like takes a second is and well, I think actually right after that she thinks, oh, maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I'm just kind of in the way and a nuisance. But then she kind of reassesses, is like, okay, he's also going through something right now. I can be still present for him. Like I can still, show up for him just by sitting here and just by like being with him right now. And just, she's accepting that, ev- neither of them are going to have perfect days all of the time. And that's the same way that Alex kind of returns that favor, towards the end when, Vero is again just like really upset and he just like accepts that she's upset and that she's like not doing good in that moment. And is just there with her, right? He's just there to support her and give her comfort, isn't there to like fix the problem and, like constantly like ask like he asks her how she is, right? But he's not being like, okay, we got to fix this, got to do this, and it's just yeah, kind of like accepting um, that it's okay to not be okay in those moments, and you can still show up and care for somebody in those moments.
Yeah, because I think also like going back to how we were saying earlier, like when people want to be like, oh, you're so brave or whatever, like the related to that is really just this idea of like if showing up for someone means having to fix it, then people will be uncomfortable. It's actually so simple. Like it's just, yeah, like what you said, it's just be there, and your presence says so much. It's like, Vero just sitting there and being there. It's really just saying, like, I'm not gonna leave you just because you're having a bad day, just because you're not this like perfect version of all time.
Hmm.
Because who among us is? It really doesn't take that much, but it's just it goes against, I think, our instincts of wanting things to look a certain way and to
Yes.
always and to kind of problem solve at all times. And it's like, well, this, we're human and we're not always problems to be solved. We're just figuring it out as we go. And what does it look like for someone who to be willing to go on that journey?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really, really beautiful and just kind of yeah, just shows like the human experience. Like you said, it's maybe not our first instinct or, nature, but it is something very simple that we can do to show our support to loved ones, friends, family, no matter kind of
Good.
what they're going through. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it was also like moments like that where I feel like I know I could have like maybe the expected thing to do in a scene like that would be to have them have like a big fight or maybe have a breakup and then wonder later will they won't they get back together and I think like there's a lot of stories that do that really well, right? Like I've enjoyed many stories that do that really well, but I also as I was writing this one was in a place where I felt very emotionally raw. And I try to think like, well, what if that's where the reader is too? And what if maybe Like, I didn't want this book to be like this anxiety inducing thing of like, oh my God, the thing that felt safe might fall apart now. And it just felt like I didn't, like, I wanted to kind of like honor our need for a little bit of comfort in those hard moments. Um, and so it, it actually ended up, even in like listening to that need this moment, so helped me realize like, yeah, that's actually what probably someone would need emotionally from me, like in my own life, if they're going through something like this. Um, so like I often say, like this book actually taught me a lot, just the process of writing it to show it for myself, but also for other people.
Yeah, that's really great. Yeah, that it's been able to like just kind of like help you to like as you were writing it. So like the situation that like I, just mentioned with where maybe at first like Veronica was like, "Oh, like why aren't you also happy right now?" And then it was like, "Okay, no, actually it's okay that he's not happy and I can sit here." Kind of related in a way to the fight that uh Vero did have with Donnie like towards the end. And I like how you mentioned that you decided to not have, Alex and Vero fight, but um having Vero and Donnie having that fight kind of towards the end, like as siblings, was partly because Vero wasn't also realizing that Donnie was going through things too, right? And obviously the things that Donnie was going through are very different from what Vero was going through, right? I think Donnie was more probably like this idea of like maybe living in Vero's shadow a little bit, or just kind of like feeling that way, not intentionally and not like she didn't like Vero for that reason, but um, and Vero didn't quite see that. So then them having kind of this, well, it started out, as an argument, and they were able to have like a heart to heart about it later, realizing that everybody's kind of going through something, right? They're just different things, on different levels, but kind of everybody's going through something. And um, yeah, just being like aware of that and having like empathy towards people. Um, is something that we can take away from that, but I really like that in a weird way. I like that they as like sisters kind of were the ones like to have that conversation,
Yeah.
right? Like I feel like that's very typical of a family. Like you fight, you love each other, but they both like learned something from that. And yeah, I thought that was very also very beautiful, and just the way that they were able to reconnect after that, and also maybe realize a little bit of the Vero kind of joked about like, "Oh, it's a good thing we're nothing like our parents." It's kind of able to see that. Yeah, I really appreciated that.
Thanks. I really loved writing Danny. Every time I write a book, I try to think of different challenges to put myself through, just because I want to try new things. And one of them is that I'm actually the younger sister in my family. It's like I have an older sister, but I wanted to write Vero as the older sister because I grew up kind of very aware of like there's different dynamics here. And I remember at one point when I don't remember, I forget how old I was. I might have been in my teens or something. I even asked my sister, I was like, what was it like? Like I was in and out of surgery a lot, and I'm sure like I took up a lot of attention, and she was like the opposite of that. And she was like, "What? No, that's fine. Nothing." But it's a question that like I have questions like this and I get to explore it with fiction. And so like what would somebody like Vero and Danny do if in fact Danny did feel like she wasn't being seen? And if that resentment comes out towards Vero rather than, like when it's not actually anyone's fault. If anything, it's the parents that need to figure out the circumstances um and just even like the way that like Vero's always the one pushing the roles, and she doesn't realize like I'm the elder sister, and and they're daughters of immigrant parents, and so there's just all these other dynamics there in terms of how strict the roles are in their household, and Vero is always breaking them, and Danny gets to be the one who like just kind of coasts by. And I had a lot of it was like that was such an important relationship for me to write, even though again it wasn't like the central one. But like they all kind of they to me they carried like such equal weight because they make up like the wholeness of her life, right? Like I
Mhm.
don't like Vero is a sister, she's a best friend, she's a girlfriend, she's a daughter, she's all these things. So of course the people in her life, like I think everyone is actually like a book, a possibility for it. And I just happen to be telling this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's, kind of classic writing advice, essentially, like make sure that all of your characters are, well-rounded and they're not just there to serve
Yeah.
the plot, right? That they also have their own stories. And so,
Yeah. I almost find that like the secondary or not secondary, but like other characters in the book, like more like easier to write because it like the protagonist has so much pressure on them to like carry the story and be interesting and fascinating and all this. And then like in walks Danny, who's like cartwheeling down the sidewalk, and then Leslie, who's just like this quirky little thing, and I love her so much. So I almost have so much fun with them. And I'm so grateful for that. These these places where you just don't have to like it's almost like an overthinking it where like I get in my own way.
yeah. Yeah. Leslie was another really great character and also served as like a really good friend to Vero. Because I think there was a line saying where Vera was like, Leslie's the only one who doesn't see my health as an inconvenience, right?
Mm.
Like she sticks by her, will hang out with her, like no matter what. Like it's like,
Yeah.
oh, like you just had surgery and you can't go anywhere. Okay, I'll come to you. Like not bothered, by it in any means and just kind of like, yeah. So yeah, she was also a very good friend. In your own life, do you feel like most of the people in your life were like Leslie and or like Alex, where they were like pretty supportive in that way?
I have yeah, it's funny because on the one hand, like Vero and I share so much in common. Um that I think a lot of times people try to like pinpoint who each character is in my life when in reality, like the characters become their own person, and a lot of times they might be inspired by someone initially, but then it becomes like this swirl of like different people that are inspiring any particular character. Um, but yeah, like I was in a lot of ways very, I would say like in my internal life, my family life, um, certain friends, like I was very, very supported in that way. Like Vito's parents are actually very different from mine. And I had to write that more purposely. And it's not to say that, how do I put it? Like Vito's parents are so strict and so, although well intentioned, they they limit her in so many ways, and they infantilize her, and they take away her agency, right? Um, and I was also kind of fascinated by this thing, like what happens. I've like where on the one hand, like disabled people get infantilized and desexualized, but then Latinas get over sexualized. And my parents were, like I said, were very different in some ways from Veto's parents, but like that doesn't mean that I didn't have forces like that coming into my life from other sources because our society as a whole carries so many elements of that. So I just often will place certain characteristics into characters, right? Where I felt less supported in my life was always once I stepped out of like this like sphere of safety in my home and family life, right? Like once I started school and was going through my surgeries and having to navigate like, kids asking about like why are you walking like that? And what are those scars for? Or like making fun of me. Like I went through a lot of bullying as a kid and um it was very traumatizing and I carried it for a lot of my life. I'm sure I still do. Um, and so just there are elements of writing this book where it was really more of like, well, what's the friend I wish I had, you know? And Leslie, for example. Even though maybe some friends were that some friends that I did have had elements of that, but like Leslie was like a whole other being, right? Um, so in a way, like Vero, like she goes through all this huge journey in like a span of a few months over summer vacation. And it took me like years to realize the things that she learned over the course of the summer.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. I know that was a bit of a personal question there, but yeah. Yeah, that's always one nice thing about fiction is that they learn things a lot faster than we tend to.
Yeah.
Yeah. takes a book, right? So, but yeah. Um, yeah, Vero's parents, like you said, they were well, and they had good intentions, right? Like they love their children, they want what's best for their children, but um very misguided in
Yeah.
the way that they were going about that. And especially, Vero's like 17 and they're still dictating every single thing that she does. And the next year, like she was planning on going off to college, and
Mm.
there's this I want to say like danger in when like parents do that, but with being like so overprotective and not letting their children do anything, and then all of a sudden they're like out in the world. I feel like that is almost like more like dangerous and harmful, like not letting the like like teenagers like make their own choices and like be able to make mistakes and learn from them while they're still like at home and have the support system is kind of like an oversight on some on some parents. Again, it's like not necessarily like intentional, but um that's just like part of like being a teenager too, is being able to have those experiences, make mistakes, and then learn
Yeah,
from them. So yeah.
absolutely. And I think there's also this element of like sometimes when people say they want to protect their children, and it's like protect them from what? And it's usually like it'll come across like if you really ask, right? I'll be like, well, the world can be so cruel, and so we don't want them to have to deal with, you know, XYZ. And then, but it's like, well, in that case, though, why are you being the first one to show it to them? Like, why are you being this child's first bully, basically? And so, like, if like in Beto's case, like if her parents are so invested in making sure she's never limping and that she's not hearing different, assimilating, and it's like, well, but you're being the first one to help to make her internalize this idea that who she is not enough and not like, and that she has to change who she is in order to be accepted rather than just be accepted. Um, and so I just, yeah, that was also something I was kind of thinking about.
Mhm. Yeah. I also always think about the part where they didn't tell Vero what the doctor had been telling them, right? Like they just weren't even giving Vero all of the information
Yeah,
about her own body, literally, that, some of her tissue was dying. Um and again, from their perspective, they're, you know, thinking they want to protect her, but again, protect her from what? Like what
yeah,
there's not telling her is not helping her,
yeah,
right? Like it's not helping her, it's not helping anyone. Um in Vero's case, it could have even been making it potentially worse,
yeah,
right? If she didn't know, just how like, serious like things were, like she maybe could have like pushed herself too far,
yeah.
and then something even worse could have happened just because they weren't um just even letting her know about herself and her own body. So, because again, they thought that they were being protective, but yeah, just really, really hurting her. And then the betrayal then that she felt afterwards when she discovered that they had been keeping this a secret was, just really sad for her too.
Like, I understand too, like, it's hard for parents to see their kids as actually grown up. It happens so fast, and you still see them as, like, this child, and so that's a really hard part, you know?
Hmm.
It it was like, in her case, it's only hurting her more to not do that, and it's only
Yes.
hurting their relationship even more too, so.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's a lot easier to have a good relationship with your parents if your parents are able to just be open, like
Yes.
give you the in to ask questions, right? And just, have those conversations. So yeah, I definitely feel for the people out there who unfortunately like don't have that relationship with their parents. But yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm very glad that at the end of the book, her parents were able to see her perform as the mermaid. So, and kind of see Vero actually doing what A, she wanted to do, but also B, that she told them that she was gonna do that, and kind of, she made that decision. She was like, okay, I really hope you guys will come see this, because I'm gonna
Yeah.
do it either way, but I'd like your support. I'd like you to be there.
Yeah, that was one of the mermaid scenes were some of the most fun for me to write, just because like I mentioned, it's like you get to kind of live vicariously through that, um, but also because like so much of her past was about hiding. Like she's hiding her scars, and even in the beginning, like she feels safe in the water because that's where people don't have to see the way she walks, and they don't have to see her scars. And so even the safety of the water in its own way is her still hiding, right? And so how to bring it to a place where she finds a way to be seen underwater. Um, and for her to even tell her parents, like, you know, if you want to come find me, then come to the show, right? So you it was also really hard too because there's so much water in the book, and there were so many times where I was like, oh my god, how many more times can I describe the water? Like how many more different ways can I do this? um but but yeah, like the Mermaid Cove ended up being really interesting to me to write too, because this idea that like they created this whole underwater, and they created like these air hoses for in order for the mermaids to be able to stay underwater all this time. And I don't even know if this made it into the book or not, but one of the notes that I wrote to myself, like on my whiteboard, like as I was figuring things out about this book, was just like they can make people swim underwater, but they can't put up a ramp. Like it's like
Mhm.
who are we willing to reimagine the world for? Because we talk about accommodations, right? Whether it's for physical disability or sensory issues or for mental health reasons, right? But it's really not. eh, Even just accommodating sometimes makes it seem like people think that you're sounding like entitled to something, or again, people will like write it. Will say like, oh, well, it's so hard to do, and it's like, no, but you put the effort in for the things you're willing to put the effort in for, and
Yes.
it really is about like who are we willing to imagine exists like into our world, right? And who are we like wanting to imagine out of it? Um, and so I just, the fact that like they literally can't survive under the water unless they create some sort of mechanism in order for them to be able to thrive, right? It was just something that I was also thinking about a lot, um, in terms of like this how powerful our own imaginations are in creating the world that we all inhabit and thrive in. Who gets to thrive in it?
Yeah, I think even Vero kind of mentions that this idea like with like the mermaids is that they're like when they're performing like they're still supposed to be like perfect, right? Like
Mm,
they're like you don't want anybody to like see that they need water, right?
yeah,
Like they do need this thing in order to be able to do what they're doing and to be able to thrive, but you also can't show the people that you need that thing, right?
yeah,
And I think even like the word like crutch was thrown around there, and how and they were like, oh, you don't want your air hose to be like a crutch. And then Vero is kind of thinking like, but sometimes you need a crutch. She's like,
yeah,
I've literally physically needed a crutch, and yet people say that needing a crutch is bad. It's like don't let anybody see that you need this crutch,
yeah.
um, even if you need it.
And it's like I feel like that's often true for even, I mean, for like even from a mental health perspective, right?
Hmm.
Of needing to recharge, needing to like if you're overstimulated and things like that. Like it's hard for people to accept that sometimes. If you're just like, oh yeah, that's just a part of what it is to be around each other sometimes,
Hmm.
depending on who you are.
Yeah, yeah, like or even with something like going to therapy
Hmm.
or taking like
Yeah,
medication for mental health. It's like saying that it's a crutch and it's a bad thing. Like it's not a bad thing. It's just, yep, this is what I need, and this is the accommodation essentially that helps me function. And
yeah.
yeah,
It
but
is such an interesting contrast, like the way mental health is stigmatized. Um, and like myself having been through kind of both things where like, I have anxiety but I've also been through surgeries, and like the way it's so much easier, not I mean, yeah, actually so much more easily accepted that like, oh, I'm gonna need medication today for this pain, right? Or oh, I'm going into surgery. And I'm going to be in the hospital for a few days, and then it'll take me like 6 weeks to like of physical therapy to recover. And like those things, because they're seen and visible and physical, like they're so much more accepted than like, yeah, I'm pregnant today and today was hard, and now I'm not okay and I'm going to need some time to recover from that, or, just things like that that are just, it's really sad how like the contrast between the two when both are equally
Yeah, I always like to say, like your we talk about like invisible disabilities, but your brain is an organ,
yeah,
too. And so
it's
if,
true.
something is going wrong in any other part of your body, like um like we can see that and we'll, try to make things better. But like with our brain, if something's going wrong with that, it should be the same thing, right? Like if
Yeah,
if there's something that's going to be able to help, whether that's like therapy or like medication or, even just taking like a mental health day or
yeah,
something like that. It's like you want your brain, that's a really important organ to
yeah.
also be healthy in that way.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I apologize if you can hear my dog whining. She's been whining for a while now, in case you're waiting, just in case you've heard it and have been wondering what that was. It's hard. No, poor little thing. She wants to, this is probably around the time she goes so that we could go to the park. So she's like, when are we going? So anyways, sorry.
No, that's okay. But yeah, I feel very grateful personally that I have friends who like on different levels like can understand, like needing mental health days. So it's like we might have like and these are like my closest friends too, and it's like we might have like plans to do something and then one of us is like, "Hey, I've had like a really rough week. Can we like take a rain check?" And then if like whichever one says that, the other one is like, "Yep, no problem. Like hope you're able to like recharge and, feel better soon. It's like, yeah, saying like, oh yeah, I'm not having like like a good mental health
Yeah,
day. Well, sometimes, the best thing or what you might need that day is like actually like going on a walk or something like with your friend. Other times you just kind of
yeah.
need a day. Yeah, being able to just say that and accept that. I'm very grateful to have people in my life
I love
who
that. Yeah,
do that.
absolutely. I'm so glad you do.
Is there anything else that you would like to talk about that we haven't yet been able to discuss today?
I don't think so. No, I appreciate like all your insights and how much thought you put into this, the book, like not just the book, but even our conversation. So yeah, I can't really think of anything.
Awesome. Well, it has just been a pleasure getting to talk to you, and I've really enjoyed this. And like I said, I really loved your book. So
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing this project. It's very important too. I'm glad. I'm so happy you're doing this.
thank you. Yeah, it's been really fun so far. So
Good.
yeah, very insightful.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I
Yep.
will go ahead and let you go. But I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Yep. You too. Thank you.
If you or a loved one is affected by anything discussed in this episode or struggling with mental health in general, know there is always help. You can call or text the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988 or visit 988lifeline.org. For the National Alliance on Mental Illness Helpline, call 1-800-950-NAMI or visit nami.org. You can also download the Not Okay app at notokayapp.com. The app will notify your trusted contacts in case of a crisis.